Hey guys, it's Dan. Welcome back. This is going to be kind of a video response to some comments that were in the very first video that I put out on this channel, which was a tutorial on how I use a brush-on application method for Army Painter Quick Shade. And there were some good questions in, again, the comment section of that video. One was regarding why I use a brush instead of the traditional dipping method with Quick Shade. But the other was why I do this kind of pre-highlighting step before I wash a model. And I thought those were good questions that deserved an answer, and I thought that a video would be the best way for me to do that, sort of juxtaposing some examples of models where I don't do this step with against those that I do. And so what I'm doing here, again, this was all detailed in that first video, but I have separated out 5 models in the back there on the left-hand side that I'm not going to do anything with. I've just done a base coat of a flat color, whatever color you like. I've just done a base coat of a flat color there, and I'm going to leave them off on the side while I go through and do this pre-highlight step on the other 35 models that are in this unit. And that's all I'm doing. So this was all as part of that first tutorial video. The methodology hasn't really changed, except that I will dry brush the silver parts in a metal color now instead of white. But what I'm doing right now is I'm taking just white scar, Games Workshop white scar, and giving this model a dusting. And I had kept a little clip there of me having too much paint on the brush, again, as another example of what not to do. So I'll load a brush and maybe paint like 3 to 4 models with a single loaded dry brush. And you can see that's all I'm doing, going through it very gently and not trying to be too thorough, really sticking to the upper raised areas of the model and just trying to pick up any edges that might have some white paint catch on it. So you want to keep it light, keep it gentle. And then what I'll end up doing next, after I finish this for these other, again, 35 models that are in this unit, is I'm going to switch over to Army Painter's Shining Silver. And I'm actually in the middle of picking up some Vallejo metal colors on the recommendation of some friends in the comment of the last video where I had lamented kind of feeling like I'm stuck with the Games Workshop colors. But I'll switch the dry brush out from white to Army Painter's Shining Silver, which is actually the brightest silver color that I've got, and do the same thing with that step. So again, I'm mostly sticking to raised areas. On flat areas, like the front of a shield, I might hit it real quick if I feel like there's some maybe bumps or something on it, but otherwise I'm mostly just sticking to textured sections. So again, here's the Shining Silver. Doing the same thing here, being a little bit more careful, more targeted, because I don't want silver on like the spear, for example. It's actually okay if you make a mistake, don't freak out, because a lot of issues will get fixed at the washing step. Because we put a really heavy wash on, and these colors will become more muted. So it's going to be hard to tell the difference between a bright silver and a white color once it's covered up with Agrax Earth Shade. But still, don't want to be deliberately making mistakes at this stage. So I'm going through and doing this dry brush step with white and then now silver. And then what I'll end up doing is going in with a detail brush with that same silver color and doing what I would call like dot highlights. And I'm a little bit more aggressive with the metal colors instead of like an actual dot that I would use for like places on the tunic or on the belt on the metal pieces. The highlights are a little bit bolder. However, I'm still sticking to the raised areas. You can really use the light here. Make sure you have a good lamp for this. But you can use the light to guide you where you're going to drop a highlight in basically anywhere you see reflections from the lamp overhead. And that's all I'm doing is I'm going through and picking out the most extreme areas, edges that are on this model, and applying a little bit of paint there as a highlight. The base color is a mixture. There's some iron breaker, some lead belcher for the chainmail and the helmets, spear tips, stuff like that. So this Shining Silver color is very bright by contrast. And I'm using the dry brush step kind of as a guide, which is what I'll do with the white color as well when I come through to drop in highlights for that, where you want to not only use the reflections from the light overhead as an indicator of where you want to place highlights, but you also want to look for where you already have existing lighter highlights from your dry brush step before. So use those to help guide where you're going to drop these colors in. My white scar is kind of semi-dried and kind of bashed up, which is why I use it for the dry brushing step. However, for highlights, for pretty much anything else, I have been using this Vallejo flat white color, and I think the coverage is excellent on it. So this is where I come in and do what, again, I would call like a dot highlight, where they're very small, light highlights that I'm putting in here, because this is pure white that we're using, and it's going to bring it up to a very high level of contrast, and it's all going to get muted out the wash step. So as I've said in multiple videos now, the model will look kind of silly by the end of this step, kind of cartoonish, very vibrant, and but it'll all get cleaned up in the next step. That's all I'm doing. I'm actually reviewing this footage here, putting more highlights on than I think I would normally with this particular model. But yeah, you're going to stick to belt straps, the tunic, again, looking for areas where the white paint caught the model at the dry brush step. Really only sticking to areas where you see reflections from the overhead lamp above, so you're not going to be highlighting like the underside of the tunic or anything like that. Sometimes on flat areas like that too, again, as part of like a pre-weathering step for the shield, I'll drop a couple of dots into, but for the most part I don't. These models are another hodgepodge. There's a couple of Victrix, like this is from the Victrix Vikings set, this banner holder here. But by and large, they are Gripping Beast miniatures that I've kit bashed with some bits from the Huscarl, the Victrix Huscarl set, to make kind of like late Saxons is what I was going with here. And so I'll do a separate video, I think, on Gripping Beast, kind of comparing them with the Victrix models. And spoiler alert, I think that Victrix does a better job, but I would like to talk a little bit about Gripping Beast and the sort of important role that I felt that they have played in the wargaming hobby in general, but Dark Age specifically. So I'll have a separate video on all that, but the short version is that I think kit bashing Victrix bits with Gripping Beast models has a pretty cool effect. So that's what a lot of these are. So same thing here. This one has a lot of folds in the tunic. That's why I included the footage of this one, because there's no chainmail on this guy. So a little bit more time intensive to highlight him up, but the principle stays exactly the same, which is that I'm looking for just raised areas that were caught a little bit by the dry brush step that had come before. The shields, actually, the shields took the longest of anything in this unit, because the yellow I used it was another Vallejo color, like flat yellow or something like that. And again, as with my Pavise weathering shield tutorial, I was indecisive, so I ended up having to do like something like 8 coats of yellow over these shields. So it was just, again, silly on my part to do it this way. This is a kind of condensed version of the weathering step that we saw in the Pavise video. So I'm just taking a dry brush. You could use a sponge, and I'm going in with dryad bark and just stippling on some like wear, and then I'll come through with just Nuln Oil with a detail brush and make some little like stripes, like sword hits, because it behaves differently. It dries a little bit differently. So that's what I'm doing on these models that I took the time to pre-highlight, just doing like a weathering step here. And then we'll jump right into a wash. So we're going to do a very, very heavy wash. I've mentioned this in the last video too, that I alternate. Sometimes I'll use Army Painter Quick Shade. I like the result of that better, using a brush-on method. It really does behave differently. I think it dries differently. And I just like the overall effect better. But the problem with it is it's more time intensive. That using a brush-on method, you're going to destroy a brush in the process. It takes more time to like get it out, set it all up, put it all back away once you're done. So it's not worth it unless you have like a big unit to do. And you have to use a lot of matte varnish, like 2, sometimes 3 coats of matte varnish at the end to get rid of the shine. So this is just a lot simpler, more user-friendly to take. In this case, I'm using Agrexer's shade mixed in with Seraphim Sepia, some other stuff, but you could just use out of the pot Agrexer's shade, Devlin Mud, if you still got that kicking around. But you can see I'm just doing an extremely heavy wash on these models, all over, even the flat areas, stuff like that. And then what I'll do is I'll either, using a paper towel, I'll get rid of some of the leftover wash on this brush, and then I'll try to wick paint away or wash away certainly on like the shield. Same thing like if I'm doing a model with white robes, I'll wash it the exact same way. Just absolutely bathe it in wash, and then I'll come back in and wick paint away either with a separate brush or with the existing one that I've cleaned up a little bit. And you want to also look for pooling in areas like eye sockets, stuff like that too, because they won't look right once they dry. But it'll take some experimenting with. But the key is to go in with way more wash than you probably need, and then take some of it away. So I'm not doing that. These 5 models on the left, remember, had no pre-highlighting, pre-weathering done whatsoever. They're just base coated and washed, and we'll see what those end up looking like at the end. So from here on, they're going to go through the exact same process as the, again, pre-highlighted models being the term that we're using for those. So 35 were done the way that we just showed, and then everything now is going to get washed. So this is a different painting session, but we're doing the same step here, which is just a heavy wash over the model. I just included this footage because I wanted to show that the highlighted models are treated the exact same way as the ones that have no highlights, which is that we're going to just bathe the model in wash. You're going to wick away anything that you don't want, and then once it's dry, you'll go through matte varnish and base. So that's what I'll do at the end here. Once these are all done and dried, I'll base them all the same way, matte varnish them. And through the magic of editing, we can cut now, actually, to the finished models. And you can see for yourselves what the difference is between these models that are highlighted and those that weren't. And here we go. So first up, this is the 5 that only were washed. So there was no highlighting done whatsoever on these guys. And you can see they turned out, I think, okay, perfectly acceptable for a tabletop standard. They were based the same way as everything else. And what I'm going to cut to here is a comparison between, on the left-hand side, those that we just saw, and on the right-hand side, those that were highlighted, or a selection of 5 that were highlighted. I realized after I did this spin that you really can't tell much from this, so I ended up breaking out individual models, as you can see here. So I tried to pick ones with similar-looking poses on the right, highlighted on the left, not, so now it's reversed because we're spinning around, but... and I don't know, maybe I'm crazy, maybe you guys can't see a difference at all, but on the right, again, highlighted, left, not. Yeah, I think that, especially on the cloth areas, like it's difficult with chainmail to see much of a difference, so the bodies maybe don't look totally different, but I think especially on things like the belts, the boots, and certainly here, like you can see these are 2 unchainmailed models that I picked, so you can see what it looks like on tunics. I think there's a big impact in terms of the highlights. These guys were all in very similar looking poses. The ones closest to us right now are highlighted. Now on the left, highlighted, right, not. So again, maybe it's a more subtle difference than I realized, but I enjoyed the process anyway, and I think the end result looks pretty neat. So, and here, those 5 blended into this unit turned out, I mean, certainly you can't tell a difference here, can you? So this is the full unit of 40 in all of its glory. That banner there is a Little Big Man Studios banner, so I'm going to do a separate video on those because they're pretty cool as well. So in the meantime, guys, thanks for dropping by, and happy gaming.